At this very moment, around 40% of adults are living with prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. That's almost half the population walking around with a condition that significantly increases their risk of dying from any cause, not just diabetes-related complications. And that's the part that doctors don't seem to tell you. You go to the doctor with some symptoms. They diagnose you with a disease caused by your lifestyle. And instead of offering help or education to change that lifestyle, they give you a medication instead, or they tell you to come back in 6 months so they can recheck your A1C. The world we live in is absolutely crazy. And here's what most people don't seem to realize. The problem isn't high blood sugar itself. The problem is insulin resistance, the condition that's been building silently in the background for decades before anyone gets diagnosed, largely driven by the modern food environment, ultra-processed foods, constant access to refined carbs, and lifestyles that push our metabolism into storage mode 24 hours a day. Insulin resistance is linked to all of the major diseases that kill us: heart disease, strokes, kidney failure, dementia, even certain cancers. The damage has been accumulating in your heart, in your brain, in your blood vessels, your kidneys, years before you notice anything is wrong. And that's the scary part. And one of the biggest drivers of insulin resistance is repeated large glucose spikes. I'm Dr. John Myers, 15 years in internal medicine, and I have watched this exact story walk through my door more times than I can count. Someone arrives with a disease that did not start that week. It built slowly, over decades, while every routine checkup told them they were basically fine. What this channel does is explain what is actually driving these conditions, and what you can realistically do about them at home, starting today. If that helps you, subscribing genuinely gets this information in front of more people who need it. And if you're already subscribed, thank you. It means a lot. So here are 20 evidence-based ways to flatten those glucose spikes, reverse insulin resistance, and pull yourself back from prediabetes or type 2 diabetes. Or to start reversing it if you've already been diagnosed. They aren't ranked in order of importance because the strategy that matters most for you depends on where you're starting from. But all of them work. And every one of them is something you can begin tonight. Number 1 is building muscle through resistance training. And most people over 60 are quietly losing the exact tissue that protects them. Before we dive into today's video, if you're over 60 and you want to live longer, feel stronger, and actually enjoy the years ahead, I wrote a book specifically for you. Not a book full of complicated science. A simple, practical plan you can start today. Most people wait until something goes wrong. Don't be that person. Get your copy now at drjohnmeyer.com. Link on screen and in the first comment below. All right, let's get into it. Your muscle is the largest place your body stores glucose. When you contract the muscle, it pulls sugar straight out of your bloodstream, and it barely needs any insulin to do it. That's the real reason a short walk after a meal lowers blood sugar so well. The bigger payoff is long-term. The more muscle you carry, the more room you have to park glucose, and the more sensitive your cells stay to insulin even on the days you don't exercise. You don't need to become a bodybuilder. 2 or 3 short sessions a week is enough, whether that's light weights, resistance bands, or just sitting down and standing up out of a chair. What matters is that the muscle is asked to work a little harder than it did last time. Number 2 is lowering your glucose spikes, and that isn't the same as cutting out every carb. There's a stubborn myth that carbohydrates are the enemy once you have insulin resistance, and it scares people off food they could actually handle fine. A carbohydrate is simply a chain of glucose, and your body deals with glucose perfectly well when it arrives slowly and in a reasonable amount. The trouble starts when sugar floods in fast and all at once. That's the steep spike, and that's when your pancreas has to fire off a surge of insulin to clean it up. So the goal is a gentle rise in blood sugar instead of a vertical one, and you can get there without getting up carbs at all. You choose carbs that release slowly, eat a smaller portion of them, and pair them with foods that slow everything down. A slow climb your body manages easily. A sharp one, repeated every day, is what wears insulin resistance into you over the years. Number 3 is liquid calories, and this is one of the fastest ways to make insulin resistance worse without ever realizing you're doing it. Fruit juice, smoothies, sweetened coffees, energy drinks, even drinks wearing a health halo like store-bought kombucha or coconut water. When you drink your sugar, there's no chewing and no fiber to slow it. It hits your stomach and goes straight into your blood almost immediately, which creates one of the sharpest sugar and insulin spikes you can possibly produce. Even a fruit smoothie does it. Blending shreds the fiber that would normally hold the sugar back, so you absorb far more, far faster than if you'd eaten the fruit whole. Then the insulin surge often overshoots and drops your blood sugar too low, leaving you tired and hungry again an hour later. That spike and crash cycle is one of the most damaging patterns for your metabolism. If you're serious about turning this around, liquid sugar is the very first thing to go. Number 4 is what goes on the plate alongside your carbs, specifically protein and fat. Eat a carbohydrate on its own and it digests fast, sending glucose into your blood in one concentrated wave. Add protein or fat to that same meal and digestion slows right down. Protein triggers gut hormones that delay how fast your stomach empties, and fat physically slows food moving through you. The result is a slower, gentler release of sugar. This doesn't mean every meal has to become complicated. It just means thinking in pairs. If you're having toast, add an egg or some peanut butter. With rice, include chicken or fish and some vegetables and olive oil. With fruit, add a handful of nuts or a piece of cheese. These small pairings change how your body handles the whole meal, and they keep you fuller longer, which quietly kills the urge to snack an hour later. Number 5 is stopping the constant snacking. And I know this one is harder to hear because we were all told for years that little meals all day keep the metabolism humming. That advice falls apart the moment you look at what grazing does to insulin. Every time you eat, even a few bites, your pancreas releases insulin. Snack every 2 or 3 hours from morning to night, and your insulin never gets a chance to come back down. It stays parked up high, and that constant elevation is one of the core drivers of insulin resistance. Your body needs stretches where insulin is low. That's when stored fat finally gets burned, when your cells reset their sensitivity, and when repair work that high insulin blocks can actually happen. So let real gaps open between meals, and let yourself get genuinely hungry before the next one. It feels strange at first if you're used to grazing, but within a few days the hunger settles and becomes easy to manage. Number 6 is managing chronic stress, and this gets overlooked almost completely in conversations about blood sugar. Stress does more than wind you up. It directly raises your glucose. When you're stressed, your body releases cortisol, your main stress hormone, along with adrenaline, and both tell your liver to dump stored sugar into your blood, ready for action. So before I go on, if any of this is making the picture click into place for you, that's exactly why this channel exists, and subscribing is the one free thing that helps me keep it going. Now, that sugar dump is useful if you're genuinely in danger and about to run. But if you're stressed sitting at the kitchen table or lying awake at 2 in the morning turning a worry over, that glucose has nowhere to go. It just sits there, and insulin has to deal with it. Over months and years, chronic stress becomes a hidden source of insulin resistance that has nothing to do with what you ate. You could follow a perfect diet and still fight high blood sugar if your stress hormones never switch off. So treating stress isn't a luxury you get to eventually. Whether it's slow breathing, a daily walk, time in the garden, or saying no to the thing draining you, it has to be regular to count. Number 7 is the order you eat your food in, and this one sounds too simple to matter until you see the research. Eat the parts of your meal in a deliberate sequence. Vegetables and fiber first, then protein and fat, and carbohydrates last, and you blunt the glucose spike from that exact same meal. The reason is that fiber, especially from vegetables, forms a gel in your stomach and small intestine that slows the absorption of everything eaten after it. Researchers at Weill Cornell Medicine, back in 2015, measured this and saw post-meal glucose drop by around 40% with no change to the food, only the order, a habit that costs nothing. In my own house, while dinner is cooking, my wife and I cut up a cucumber, some carrots and celery, and work through it with a tub of hummus, talking about our day. It loads us with fiber before the meal even starts, and honestly, it's the part of the evening I look forward to most. Number 8 is sleep, and poor sleep is one of the fastest ways to wreck your insulin sensitivity. It doesn't take weeks. A single night of short or broken sleep can blunt your glucose tolerance the very next day. Your cells turn sluggish to insulin, your hunger hormones get scrambled, and you find yourself reaching for sugar and fat to make up the energy you're missing. Do that night after night, and you've built yourself a slow metabolic disaster. What matters here is the steadiness as much as the hours. Going to bed and waking up at roughly the same time every day keeps your internal clock regular, and that clock helps run your insulin sensitivity. Your body handles glucose better at some hours than others, and stable sleep is what keeps that rhythm intact. Aim for 7 to 9 hours in a cool, dark room with the screens off before bed. That's about protecting your metabolism, not only feeling rested. Number 9 is avoiding what I call naked sugar. That's any sweet food eaten completely on its own, with nothing alongside it to slow it down. A cookie by itself in the afternoon, a handful of candy, a pastry on an empty stomach. These create some of the largest, fastest glucose spikes you can generate, because there's nothing there to buffer the sugar. It's absorbed almost instantly, and your insulin response has to be just as aggressive to match it. You don't have to swear these foods off forever, though cutting back clearly helps. The trick is to never eat them naked. If you're going to have something sweet, have it at the very end of a meal, after you've already eaten protein, fat, and fiber. That way the sugar joins a mixed meal and gets absorbed slowly. The spike is smaller, the insulin response is calmer, and the cost to your metabolism is far lower for the exact same treat. Number 10 is to start paying attention to insulin itself. Almost everyone with prediabetes or type 2 only ever gets their blood sugar measured, and glucose is a late signal. By the time it reads high, you've usually had years of high insulin quietly compensating behind the scenes. Insulin rises first, sometimes a full decade before glucose ever looks abnormal. So if you want to catch insulin resistance early or prove to yourself you're reversing it, you measure fasting insulin, not just fasting glucose. Here in the United States, you ideally want that fasting insulin number below 5, and certainly below 7. If it's higher than that, while your glucose and your A1C still read normal, you're already insulin resistant. And the strategies that bring insulin down, eating less often, dropping the ultra-processed food, moving regularly, managing stress, are the very same ones that stop blood sugar from ever becoming a problem. Many doctors won't order a fasting insulin test on their own, and some insurers won't cover it, so you may have to ask for it directly or pay out of pocket. If it catches this years before diabetes, it's one of the best small investments you can make. Number 11 is cutting back on ultra-processed food, and this goes well beyond just sugar. These are foods built in a factory to sell, with ingredients you'd never find in your own kitchen, things like emulsifiers, stabilizers, and artificial flavors. They're engineered to be easy to overeat, and they seem to worsen insulin resistance on their own, even when the calories are held exactly the same. An NIH metabolic ward study back in 2019 showed precisely that. Part of the problem is they're broken down so easily they deliver their sugar almost instantly, with no fiber and no structure to slow it. And there's growing evidence the additives themselves may disturb your gut bacteria and your metabolic signaling. A simple rule: if it comes in a package with a long list of ingredients you don't recognize, it's probably ultra-processed. Lean on whole foods as much as you can. If it didn't exist as food 100 years ago, your body is probably still trying to figure out what to do with it. Number 12 is moving after you eat. You don't need a run or anything strenuous. A 10 or 15-minute walk is plenty. When you move, your muscles contract, and a contracting muscle pulls glucose out of your blood through a separate route that doesn't need insulin at all. This is especially powerful right after a meal, because that's exactly when sugar is pouring into your bloodstream fastest. Get up and walk within about 30 minutes of finishing, and you blunt that spike significantly. Do it day after day, and you train your muscles to be better at clearing glucose, even when you're sitting still. This is one of the highest return habits in the entire list. It costs nothing, needs no equipment, and folds into a normal day. A short walk after dinner instead of a couch is one of the simplest things you can change tonight. Number 13 is lining your eating up with your body clock. Your ability to handle glucose isn't the same all day. It runs on an internal clock that makes you most sensitive to insulin in the morning and least sensitive at night. The same meal eaten at 8 in the morning causes a smaller glucose and insulin response than if you ate it at 10 at night. That's why eating late, especially heavy carbs late, is so costly. Your body simply isn't set up to deal with it well after dark. So one of the easiest shifts is to push more of your food earlier in the day. A real breakfast, a solid lunch, and a lighter dinner, finished at least 2 or 3 hours before bed. That gives your body time to handle the meal while your insulin sensitivity is still high. And as a bonus, it tends to improve your sleep too. Number 14 is getting the right tests done, the earlier markers that move before glucose ever does. Your A1C, which is your average blood sugar over about 3 months, is considered normal under 5.7% here, but ideally you want it closer to 5.4 or lower, because the risk climbs gradually long before the official cutoff. And you can learn a surprising amount from 2 numbers that may already be on your last lab sheet: your triglycerides and your HDL cholesterol. If your triglycerides are high and your HDL is low, that pattern strongly points to insulin resistance, even when your glucose still looks fine. Divide your triglycerides by your HDL. In the US, a ratio above 3 suggests insulin resistance, while under 2 is much healthier. So don't lean on one normal blood sugar result. Ask for your A1C, your fasting insulin, and a full cholesterol panel, and look at the whole pattern instead of a single number. Catching this early can buy you years, sometimes decades, to turn it around. Number 15 is creating longer insulin-free stretches across your day. Every time you eat, insulin goes up. Eat constantly and it never comes down. But keep your food inside a defined window, say 10 or 12 hours, and stop eating after dinner, and you give insulin several hours to fall back to baseline. That's when your cells start resetting their sensitivity, and when your body can finally tap into stored fat, because high insulin blocks fat burning. You don't need anything extreme. No skipping meals, no fasting for days. Just stop eating after dinner, and don't start again until breakfast. It sounds obvious, but a lot of people graze late into the evening or eat first thing out of habit before they're even hungry. I struggled with the late evening habit myself, and I promise it gets easier. Tightening your eating into a consistent daily window is one of the most sustainable things you can do for your metabolism. Number 16 is moderating or even dropping alcohol. Most people never connect their drinking to insulin resistance, but the link is strong. Alcohol disrupts your blood sugar in several ways at once. It interferes with your liver's ability to release glucose steadily, which can send you into a reactive low. It drives fat to collect around your organs, the visceral fat most tightly tied to insulin resistance, and it wrecks your sleep, which, as we already covered, drops your insulin sensitivity the very next day. Even moderate drinking, a couple of glasses of wine a few nights a week, can be enough to stall your progress if you're trying to reverse this. You can still have a drink now and then, though less is clearly better. What matters is being honest about how much and how often, and seeing it for what it is, something working against the goal. For some people, cutting it out completely for a few months is what finally lets every other change take hold. Number 17 is putting fiber at every single meal. And this is one of the most consistently helpful things you can do for your blood sugar. Fiber, especially the soluble kind from vegetables, beans, oats, and certain fruits, slows your digestion and blunts how fast glucose gets absorbed. It also feeds the good bacteria in your gut, which produce compounds that improve insulin sensitivity. Most people should aim for around 30 grams of fiber a day, but the average American gets only about 15. That's a big gap, and closing it is straightforward. Put vegetables on the plate at every meal, not just dinner. Add spinach to your eggs. Have a side salad with lunch. Reach for a piece of fruit, some nuts, or a few beans instead of chips. It doesn't have to be complicated, and the more you do it, the more automatic it gets. Number 18 is aiming at visceral fat, not just the number on the scale. Visceral fat is the deep fat packed around your internal organs, down in your belly. It's metabolically active, pumping out inflammatory signals and hormones that directly drive insulin resistance. And here's the catch. You can be a perfectly normal weight on the scale and still carry too much of it if you're inactive or eating poorly. Your waist tells you more than the scale does. For men, a waist over about 40 inches is high risk. For women, over about 35. So even if your weight is barely moving, a shrinking waist means you're losing the visceral fat, and that's what matters most for reversing insulin resistance. Resistance training and cutting ultra-processed food are two of the best ways to target this specific fat. It's also the single biggest lever for a lot of people over 60, which is exactly why it deserves its own deep dive. Number 19 is about medication, and this one needs some nuance. Drugs like metformin or the newer GLP-1 medicines can genuinely help lower your blood sugar and cut your risk of complications. They're useful tools, especially when insulin resistance is severe or lifestyle changes alone aren't getting there fast enough. But they manage the problem rather than fixing its root. Metformin makes your cells more sensitive to insulin and tells your liver to release less glucose. The GLP-1 drugs slow your digestion and dial down your appetite. Neither one reverses the actual cause, which is years of metabolic overload from diet, inactivity, stress, and poor sleep. So medication is support for the fundamentals. Lean on it if you need it. Your doctor prescribed it for a reason, but keep doing the work underneath. The goal over time should be to need less of it, not more. And number 20, the one that holds all the others together, is consistency over perfection. Insulin resistance didn't appear overnight, and it won't reverse overnight either. It built over years, and it takes steady effort over months to turn around. But here's the relief in that. The effort doesn't have to be perfect. You don't need to nail all 20 of these flawlessly. You pick a few, you do them most days, and you let them stack up. Small changes repeated daily beat dramatic changes that last a week and collapse. Walk after meals most days. Sleep well most nights. Eat whole food most of the time. Over weeks and months, your fasting insulin starts to drop. Your energy steadies, your waist shrinks, and your long-term risk of diabetes, heart disease, and everything that travels with insulin resistance falls right along with it. So if you want the short version, here's where to start tonight. 1. Take a 10-minute walk after your next meal. 2. Eat your vegetables first and your carbs last. 3. Stop drinking your sugar, starting with tomorrow's juice or sweet coffee. 4. Close the kitchen after dinner and leave it closed until breakfast. 5. At your next appointment, ask for your A1C, your fasting insulin, and a full cholesterol panel. None of those cost much, and any one of them moves you in the right direction. The habits you keep in your 50s and 60s are the ones that decide whether your 70s, 80s, and 90s are spent gardening, traveling, and picking up grandchildren, or spent in waiting rooms. Small daily choices never feel powerful in the moment, but over years they quietly decide how well you age. Now, of everything on this list, the one that moves the needle fastest for most people over 60 is that visceral fat from number 18, the deep belly fat driving the whole problem. And most people get one thing badly wrong about it. You can't target it with crunches or willpower, but a handful of ordinary everyday foods strip it away faster than almost anything else, while a few so-called healthy ones quietly pile it back on. I put the full breakdown in another video, the exact foods that melt visceral fat after 60 and the ones to drop. Watch that one next, and you'll know precisely what to eat to attack insulin resistance right at its source.